Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to talk about running Ruby on Rails in Docker. My name is Tyler Flint. I am a co-founder and CEO of Nanobox. And a little bit about myself. I have been doing this professionally for about 12 years now. And early on in my career, I had an opportunity to build an infrastructure and a very, very large scale deployment for a very large enterprise company. And that experience, just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But that experience led to another opportunity, which led to another opportunity. And before I knew it, 7 years had flown by, and as I kind of took a look back, I realized that I had, and the team as well, that we had the opportunity to work for some of the largest, most recognizable brands in the world. Now, there were some really hard experiences and great experiences. But I just feel so fortunate and so lucky to have had the experiences and opportunities that I have had, and ultimately really had opportunities to build out large-scale infrastructures, integrate cloud with various cloud offerings, and get the various applications deployed. And scaling on all these different clouds. And the culmination of all of those experiences led into Nanobox. So Nanobox, our mission is to enable the application developers of the world, the Rails developers of the world, to be able to focus on writing amazing code, focus on your Rails app, focus on delivering features. Don't get lost in the weeds. Don't have to go through all of the same experiences that we had to go through, and at the same time be able to have all of the advantages and all of the opportunities to your application and to your team, to your business that you would have if you had the same team that we have that went through all those different experiences. So ultimately at Nanobox, we want you, the application developer, to be able to focus on writing code, and Nanobox takes care of the rest. And so if you're wondering at this point whether or not you're at the right, if you're on the right webinar, this will not be a webinar for ops people. We're not going to go into really deep ops concepts. We're not going to dive into the inner workings of Kubernetes. We're not going to develop a Linux kernel module. We are going to have a conversation directly to Rails developers, the application developers. We love app developers, and we feel very strongly that Docker can help you be it can help you be a much better developer, and ultimately allow your application to be better. Because in the end, that's what we are. We are developers. And as we kind of look back on all the experiences that we've had, and kind of leading into this, we realized that one of the major reasons that we had so much success going from one opportunity to the next opportunity was our focus on solution and workflow, and that the tooling is ultimately just a means to an end. And so that's where we're gonna keep it today. Docker is phenomenal. It's really cool. It is just tooling, and what we're more focused on is how you, as the Rails developer, can have a better end result. We want to show you workflows that are going to make you a better Rails developer. So first off, leading into that, why Docker? Why would I use Docker if I'm a Rails dev? Why does that matter? Because isn't Docker for ops people and ops teams? And I'm not that. I'm a Rails dev. So why Docker? Well, it's just exactly what I was mentioning, because ultimately Docker, the reason why we're so excited about Docker is because it gives you, the Rails developer, abilities that you simply don't have. And after our application is containerized and Dockerized, we can do things that are simply phenomenal. And we definitely want to show you those. So, one of the first things that comes to mind when we think about Docker is its portability. And why does that matter to you? Because that means that you can take your Rails app after it's Dockerized, packaged up into an image, and you can run that on anywhere. You can run that on all of the major cloud providers, and even in your own on-prem data center, if that makes sense. It allows you, after you've created all these amazing features, and the world has figured out that your app is incredible, and it changes their lives, and they all start flocking to your application and your solution. And it allows you to go from a single node up to dozens or even hundreds of nodes with minimal effort. Very, very scalable. It allows you to see into your application, your running application, with your log output, the health, how it's consuming resources in ways that were just really, really difficult to do beforehand. You get built-in security. We're able to eliminate things out of the environment that our application doesn't need, and that in the end, only things that are running inside of your environment are absolutely necessary for your Rails app. And Docker makes that really, really nice. And then, for most Rails devs, you're developing features, and you want to be able to release even multiple times a day these updates. And so, if you're using Capistrano or these other deployment tools, you may have kind of noticed that the end result to your users is maybe less than ideal. Maybe maybe as you're updating, you're kind of seeing things update over here. Maybe every other request is kind of wonky. And Docker allows us to do atomic updates that make a lot of sense, and we'll actually see these. So we're actually going to see all of these. So what we're going to do is we're going to Dockerize a Rails app. And after we Dockerize this Rails app, I'm actually going to show you all of these benefits. And we're going to keep it high level here. We are going to dive into the configuration. We're going to show you specifically how you do certain things. But we want to keep it high level. We want to keep it so that you can really see how this benefits you, and how ultimately what we want is, at the end of this, for you to be able to see how you can do things as a Rails developer, or maybe as a team lead or a product manager, that you simply couldn't do before, and it ultimately puts the trajectory of your business and your project just on a rocket ship without any ceilings. But before we do that, before we jump into seeing some of those really, really cool things, we need to be able to wrap our head around how we configure Docker. So you may have, and at this point I'm assuming that everybody's heard of Docker, that everybody one way or another has maybe seen a little bit of it, they've heard about it, their friends have talked to them about it. And if you're like most developers, most Rails developers, what happens is you go and you check it out. You hear something about it, and then your head's spinning. You don't really know where it fits. You don't know how it fits into the context of your Rails app. You don't really know how to use it, and where do things go. And so let's start there. Let's wrap our heads around this. So what we're looking at here is a Rails app, the source code for a Rails app, which everybody here should be familiar with. You've got our gem file, our reg file. So the Docker configuration we're going to keep it simple. There's no reason to create an external project. There's no reason to put it outside of this application. We are Dockerizing this application. So let's go ahead and put the Docker configuration with our source code. And to do that, we're going to create a .docker folder at the root of our Rails application. So it should be at the same level as your gem file. And the reason that we're going to do this is because we want to put all of our Docker configuration and all of our Docker artifacts in this directory to get it out of, we don't want it to be mingled at the root of your source code. It can get messy, can get confusing. So we want to keep that nice and isolated. So with that, the next thing, which is this one's really, really important. I don't care what you've heard, I don't care what you've read. Don't try to have your dev environment and your live environment configuration in the same Docker file or in the same place. The reality is that while it might seem like there are some similarities, the differences are vast, and the workflows and the packages that you need in development are very different than what you need in live, and it just makes our lives a whole lot easier if we keep those separate. So inside of this .docker folder, we're going to have a dev directory and we're going to have a live directory. And so inside of our dev directory, we're going to have a Docker file, which is going to define the environment that we're going to use to run the application in development. And then we're also going to have a Docker Compose file. And Docker Compose is a tool that is provided by Docker that allows you to run basically a stack. And so in this case, this Rails app is going to depend on Postgres. And you know, most Rails apps are going to have at least one database, if not you know, some sort of Redis or other component. And so Docker Compose allows us to run those together. And then for our live environment, we're also going to have a Docker file, and then we'll also put any kind of live platform configurations. And so the boxfile.yaml is how we configure this application for a Nanobox deployment, and that's what we're actually going to show in this presentation. So at this point, hopefully you have a solid mental picture of where this goes, where this lives within your application. When we're done here, you should clearly have a sense that all the Docker configuration is within the application in a .docker directory, and then we've separated the configuration, we isolated the configuration into two environments, a dev environment and a live environment. And that's where we're going to keep it easy, keep it there easily. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's run through this configuration, and let's run over to my editor. So the first thing is, I've got my application here. Let's go ahead and create a dev environment. Now, what I'm going to say about a dev environment is, I know that not everybody wants to fix their dev environment. That's totally fine. So if you don't want a dev environment, don't follow along on this part. We get it. Go ahead and use your local dev environment if that works fine for you. I like running all of my applications inside of Docker. I like that they're clean. I like that I have everything that I need, and I like that I can just blast them and bring them back up without any cruft on my system. So to do that, let's go ahead and start with the Docker file. And I'm going to just quickly kind of run through these. At the end of this webinar, I'll provide a link to this project. I actually have it hosted on, I've pushed it up to GitHub, and so you can actually take a deeper look. So for this, we're just going to kind of run through the Docker file. And so starting at the top, what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, we want to start from the official Ruby 2.3 image, and we're also using Alpine, which is just a really slimmed down Linux distribution. It has just what we need and nothing more. And I'm a minimalist, so I prefer Alpine. And then we're going to add a convenience args from the MBX tool, and we'll see the MBX tool here in just a minute. Okay, so then really where it starts to get interesting is we need to install packages. And so this Alpine image comes stripped down, and so we're going to need to add some real shells so that we can actually do development. So we'll install bash and Z shell. And again, I mean, this Alpine image is very small. And then also we're going to need build base that brings in the compile tools, dev headers, so that we can actually install gems and do some other stuff. A lot of times I use pry. At least I like to use pry. So we'll go ahead and add incurses. We are going to need Node.js so we can run assets, and also very common to pull gems directly from GitHub. So in order to do that, we'll go ahead and include Git and the OpenSSH client. And since this application is using Postgres, we're going to go ahead and include the Postgres dev headers, and lastly the time zone files. Okay, so with that, at this phase, Docker will build the environment that has all the packages that we need, and then we're going to make the app directory and set that to our working directory. So all this is doing here is essentially saying we are going to take this application here from our development environment, and we're going to ultimately mount it inside of app. And so we go ahead and create those directories. And then lastly, we do the bundle install. And so to do the bundle install, we have to copy the gem file and the gem file.lock into that app directory and run bundle install. At this point, we should have an environment that has everything that we need except the application. So now, how do we get the application in there? So let me just take a quick step back, and I want to highlight one thing. So we see two files in here. Well, there's three, but really two here. So the Docker file, and you can think of Docker file as a way to define the environment from which your application will run, or within which your application will run. Your environment is going to run inside of a container that was built from a Docker file. So we have to have a Docker file to define the environment. Then we create a compose file which defines the services to run. So let's kind of run through here. So the first thing we'll notice is that we have a database service, and we're just pulling from Postgres. We are going to have to create a volume which will allow the data to persist. And then we're going to pull in an M file, which we'll go over in just a sec. The same goes for the Rails web service. We just define it in the services node. The difference here is that we need to define how to build this. So we're pointing it to this Docker file here, and then when we actually run the app, we want it to run the following command: bundle exec rails, which we actually don't even need bundle exec because it's running inside. So we could clean that up. We could remove bundle exec. And that's one of the advantages of running inside of Docker is you don't have to do bundle exec things because it's the only thing running. So it's obviously going to have only the gems inside of that container that actually matter. So we don't have to do bundle exec. So with that, we'll be able to run Rails. We want to run it on port 3000 and then bind it to all interfaces. And this is the trick. So this is now how we get the app source to mount into that container at /app. And that is going to allow us to make all of our edits, all of our changes to the code base while running that, while seeing those actually propagate. And then we'll be able to have a full development environment. We are also going to need to tell Docker to forward port 3000 from localhost into port 3000 inside of this container. We'll go ahead and lastly we'll say this depends on DB, so make sure that service is up first. Okay, so really simple. I mean, just really simple. Now I know there's some complexity here, and don't worry so much about that. It's two things I'll say here. We'll be releasing tooling here that will actually generate this for you. In fact, all of this configuration here was generated for me with a tool that I'm going to show you. And And so really as a Rails dev, you don't need to really understand this, but just to kind of explain how all of this works, it's fun to go through this. So then in the .m file, we just have two environment variables. One, the compose project name, which is Rails, and that we set that so that if you have other applications that you're running, so I mean this could be the name of your project, it just isolates them from each other. And then also just setting a DB host environment variable to DB. And the reason that I did that is so that in my config database, I can fetch that directly as the host, and I don't have to do any other configuration. So anyway, so that makes that easy. All right, cool. So let's actually see this in action. Let's get this this dev environment up and running. So to do that, let's move on over to our terminal where we can see that we are in the source code. And to run it, so essentially all I'm going to use is Docker Compose to run this. But I'm actually going to use a tool called MBX, and if you're curious, we can provide more information on MBX. MBX is a workflow tool that is provided by Nanobox, and it generates it automatically generates configuration for your application, so you don't really need to if you don't want to. The other thing is it provides a lot of helpers for making the dev environments simple, and lastly, it is how you can manage your Dockerized apps on Nanobox in production. So I'm going to go ahead and use MBX, but I don't want you to think that MBX is the only way. In fact, in this case, all it is doing when I type MBX dev, it is literally just an alias for Docker Compose. And then cding into that dev directory. So I'll go ahead and say mbx dev up. So mbx dev up is going to build the development environment and run it. So let's go ahead and run that. We'll see that it starts up the database, and lastly it streams all of the logs, which makes it so nice. So we can actually see here this application is running and the logs are streaming, and it's saying, hey, we can go to port 3000. So let's do that. Let's run over to our browser here and let's go to 127.0.0.1 port 3000. And we can see this running. Oh, by the way, this application that I'm using, I didn't write it. I actually just did a Google search for a Rails blog, and I did that on purpose because while yes, I have written many Rails applications, I want to show that you can literally take any Rails app from anywhere, and you can Dockerize it and configure it for Docker deployments. So this was a demo blog that I think somebody used in a conference talk to show how to create a blog in Rails 5. So this one allows us to create posts. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new post so you can kind of see how that works. And Docker is cool because it gives me superpowers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create that post, and it's saved in the database. If we go over here, we'll notice that as we're making requests, all of the logs are streaming. So at this point, I just want to kind of take a step back and say, so this herein lies the rationale for me wanting to run Docker. Run a Dockerized development environment. It's fully containerized. I mean, it's fully isolated and contained. This database that's running isn't running any other application. There's no data inside of this database for any other application that I may have run. If I need to hop into the environment, I can. But most of the time, I just want to run the application. Like I just want to run the application and then make changes to the source code. Which let's go ahead and let's see if we can find something here that we can change. So you can see posts, index. Okay, posts. So let's change this to all the posts. Okay, so I make that change and I go back over to the demo blog. Like, as I'm developing my source code, it's all there, all the same advantages of running locally. It's really quick, and one of the best things for me is that when I'm done, I can simply shut it down, and we can see here that the application is shut down. It's not running anywhere on my machine at all. I love that. I'm a minimalist. I like that I have my entire development environment started and stopped. Let me just show you one other thing real quick. If I needed to hop into that environment, I can do that. So I can actually say, mbx dev run, and I just specify the service that I want to run, which is web, and then a command that I want to run inside of it. So I can actually just do rake-t and see exactly. Let's see, what did I do here? Okay, sorry. So I guess my -t got interpreted here, so I would need to put that in quotes. But so the other thing I can do, I can just drop in bash here, and what you'll notice is that it actually starts up my database for me when it notices that I need to hop in here. So now that I'm in here, I can run a Rails console, do whatever one-off commands that I need to inside of this environment, just the same way that I would locally, and it's just totally compartmentalized. I love that. And then lastly, I think this is probably my favorite thing. I don't know why this gives me such satisfaction. I guess I'm kind of weird, but I love running this command right here. mbx dev implode. When I'm done with this environment, I love that I can implode it, and it removes everything. Like, it removes all the associated containers, all of the databases, everything. It's gone. And to know that if I wanted to run that again, I could just run dev up, and it would bring it all back up. So I think that's probably enough of a foray into the dev environment. And again, I will go ahead and make this available on GitHub, so you can actually use this yourself and kind of translate this to your environment. And then just a quick note on MBX. If you are interested in MBX, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we can actually get you MBX. It does make this this process a lot easier, and just really kind of streamlines the flow. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and close down our dev environment, and let's look at configuring a live environment. And then we're going to get to some fireworks here. We're actually going to show some really cool stuff that we can do with this application. Okay, so for our live application, we'll notice a couple of things. So first thing you're going to notice is that the Docker file is a bit more intense. And that is true because running the application in production, things get a little bit more intense. But not to worry. Again, assuming that you're interested, you can leverage the MBX tool's ability to generate this configuration for you, or you can reach out to the Nanobox team. We'd be more than happy to kind of help you kind of get these things set up. But let's go ahead and dive in because there's a lot to there's a lot to digest here. So much so that we actually generate headers here, but hopefully we can at least follow. So essentially in this Docker file, the steps that we're going to follow is, one, we're going to set all of the labels, build-ars, and evars that are going to be necessary for running this container, as well as kind of building. Second is we're going to install all of the permanent packages that the live environment is going to need to run this application. Then, of course, we need to run a bundle install, and we are also going to need to copy the app source and then override any configuration. We'll lastly precompile assets and then tell it what to run. Now, before we dive into this, I just want to say the order matters. because if you don't want super long deployments, it is very critical here that we get the order right. So as an example, so that's why I want to kind of go through this. So let's go ahead and start with our meta. So in this case, this label informs Nanobox to route to port 3000. So if we wanted to run this application via Nanobox, that would inform it to run there. Set some convenience args for building, and then we also are going to set some Rails environments. So we're going to tell Rails that we're always in production, and that we want to go ahead and log to standard out, and go ahead and serve static files. Now there's more optimal ways that we can do that, but just to make sure that things work consistently, let's go ahead and let Rails serve static files. And again, we're going to set our working directory to app, which is where the final app is going to be. Now we can look into the various packages. So what's really cool here is that the packages that we actually need in production are much slimmer than what we need in dev. So we'll go ahead and add bash, which isn't really necessary, but anyone who's ever kind of had to debug without bash would appreciate the benefit of having bash. Okay, let's go ahead and add Postgres, some time zone files, Node.js and Yarn. Well, the quick note on this, you do not need Node.js and Yarn. It is not required. However, it does require some minor configuration of your Rails app. But because I didn't want to blow this, I know that everyone's busy here, and I didn't want to blow this into a 2-hour presentation. I figured let's just make it easy. Let's just include Node.js and Yarn. However, when I run my Rails apps in production, they do not have Node.js. Everything has been compiled. And the changes, and actually just real quick, let me just show you what needs to change. So if we look in the gem file, we often find that there's a bunch of like SAS, coffee, uglifier, and stuff that's just kind of in the general, that's in the general group here. And so when running in production, when these try to load, if they can't find a JavaScript runtime, they will bonk, and they will throw errors. And so to be able to get that to work, we would have to throw these in a different group, and I just didn't want to do it for this presentation, but just wanted to call out that that really you can make the production environment very small, but for simplicity, we'll just keep that in there for now. Okay, so now with Bundler, and the trick here is that we really want to only copy the gem file and gemfile.lock before we run a bundle install. And the reason for that is because Docker uses layers. Whenever a layer underneath gets changed, all of the layers above have to be rebuilt. And so by copying the application, if you ever make a change to your application source code, that would force us to do a bundle install on every deploy. And so since we only want to do a bundle install whenever the gem file changes, we only are, so that's where I mentioned about order. We're going to make sure that we do the bundle install first before we copy the source code in, and we're only going to copy the gem file and gemfile.lock. So that will actually, that will cache the contents, check some of those files, and if on a subsequent build, if it sees that they haven't changed, then it won't actually run this again, the bundle install. So in order to do the bundle install, what we're going to do is we're going to install build base, but we roll that back right after doing the bundle install, and we do that in a single command so that we don't have any cruft kind of left around. Okay, and then at this point we go ahead and we move the source code into this image. So we copy into /app, and then we override configuration. And so this is where we're able to do some really cool things. So Docker has what we call artifacts. So there's configuration and then configuration artifacts, and that's also why it's so critical to have all of your Docker configuration nested and kind of isolated away from the rest of your app. So here we'll see that in this config directory, I have a database.yaml file and also a Puma file, which are very different than what they look like in my source code all the time. And so to create that final image, what I do is I tell Docker, after I've pulled in the source code here, I want to copy those configuration artifacts from here into the image at /app/config, and that will override the config database.yaml and the config puma.rb. And so what that allows me to do is it allows me to create configuration specific to the live environment, tuned, customized for the live environment, and I don't have to worry about, oh man, that's going to screw up somebody's local development environment. And so that's it's really, really nice. I think that's one of the kind of little nuggets of Docker that I just really love. Okay, with the application added in, source code added, and the application actually in, we can recompile the assets. We run that, and then lastly, we just say that, hey, when you run this, just run Puma, and then app config the path to the puma.rb file. Okay, so that's the Docker file. Now, if you have a worker, things would be slightly different here. And again, the MBX tool would detect you have a worker, and it would kind of structure things differently. But if you had a worker, likely what we would end up doing is creating a folder in here, creating two different folders, one for web, and then inside of web, putting the Docker file inside of there, and then having worker and have another Docker file, and so just so that they're isolated. But this is a simple application, and it doesn't have a corresponding worker, so we can just kind of keep that Docker file out here in the open. Okay, so I apologize for kind of going so quickly, but there's just so much to cover. And I recognize that there is a lot that there's a lot of depth here, and there's a lot of things that we could go over, but we want to kind of keep this to at a high level, because one, and our vision, our goal as Nanobox is we want to create tooling and workflows that allows you to continue to focus. And so that's why we've created the MBX tool that will generate this configuration for you, so you don't really have to know how to kind of configure it. And mostly what we want to accomplish in this webinar is a high-level overview of kind of how this looks, and then lastly, kind of like what this means to me, and how does this make me such a better Rails dev, and how does this make my application better. And so let's go back over some of those high-level points here. That Docker is portable, scalable, visible, secure, and it allows us to have atomic updates. Okay, so now let's go ahead and see some fireworks. So full disclosure here. Now you can. So with this configuration, you would be able to run Docker on any sort of Docker production platform. But obviously, I'm the founder of Nanobox. I am biased, and the nice thing about Nanobox is that it is very visual, and so we'll be able to demonstrate all of those advantages while using Nanobox. But you could absolutely use something else. It's just kind of outside of the scope of this presentation. So what I've done is I've taken that Rails application and I've actually deployed it to 3 different cloud providers. I've deployed that application on Linode, on DigitalOcean, on AWS. So let's go ahead and pull them up here. So I'm going to open these up in their own tabs. And I'll hop in here and we can kind of see this application. So I'm going to pop open the live app here. We can see we've got it running on linoderails.nanoapp.io. We've got that application running. Same thing for Rails, for DigitalOcean. We've got it running, and also for AWS. Okay, so like clearly you can see here, like I've got the same application, and I can run it on any cloud provider, and that's one of the big advantages of using Docker. And Nanobox helped us get there, but really, Docker is what makes that possible. And so just to kind of show you that it actually works, let's go ahead and create a new post. Again, let's use the same title. Docker is cool because it gives me superpowers. And bam. Okay. And I probably should actually start with a little bit of context. Let's kind of break this down. We've got this that Rails app. It's running. We'll use the Linode one here. We're running on a single Linode server for now, and we can break out to see that we actually have our database and the web containers that are running there. Okay, so we can see portability here, full force. Very, very portable. We can run on any cloud provider. And the cool thing here is, let's say that you start on one cloud provider, and then something happens and it doesn't make sense to be on that cloud provider, and now you want to move to another one. That is really, really easy to do because you have Dockerized your application. And Nanobox can actually help you with that if you're so inclined there. Okay, so let's now show so the next thing as a developer, what we want to see is how can I make updates to this application. So we actually made a change over here already. We changed in our dev flow, we added all the posts. So so with that, let's go ahead and actually push that change to one of our deployments. So let's go ahead and do to push that to DigitalOcean. So using the MBX tool, we can actually push. So that's my account there, and then the name of the deployment. And here we can actually see the Docker process play out. What we can see is that it builds this image, it runs the assets precompile, because yeah, we have to. It's preferable to do that locally, and then we're going to take that image, because it built the image and tagged it for me, and it's going to push that or synchronize that image live. Now let's go ahead and see this firsthand, what actually happens here. So we'll go ahead and open this up so we can kind of see it. The dashboard is going to be give us a notification as soon as this image makes it all the way up there. So it looks like it's synchronized the image. There we go. Okay, so now we actually get to see this play out. So because we have Dockerized, here's what we're going to see. We're going to see that we can actually spin up a completely new container and run it alongside of the existing container. And so that allows us to run two of them side by side long enough to update our load balancer to point to the new container, and then after all the traffic has been updated to route to this new container, then we can bring down the old container. And so we can actually go over here and see that we have a change to the application, and the way that happened through Docker, because of Docker, was that it just was so much simpler. We didn't have to worry about taking the source code that's running up there like we do with Capistrano deployments, where we update the live source code and try to do a reload of Puma, and some requests get one, some requests get another. If we've got multiple nodes, they're on kind of different cycles. It gets really complex. And so with Docker, we can kind of see how that is just really, really, really simple. Okay, so the next thing that we talked about was scalability. So let's go ahead and see scalability kind of play out. Let's run over to our AWS. So what we'll do here is let's go ahead and say, okay, we're under load and we want to actually scale up our application. Right now we're just kind of running on the one node. We actually want to scale it up to, let's say, 5. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to move the web component off of that server onto a horizontal cluster. I'm going to go ahead and I can choose the size here, but I'll just go ahead and leave it to what it is. By the way, this is the entire AWS catalog, and so Nanobox makes the entire catalog, exposes the it exposes the entire catalog to the to Nanobox. And so I'm going to go ahead and keep that instance there, and then scale that up to 5, and go ahead and submit that. So what we're actually going to see here is Nanobox is going to go ahead and order, provision, and set up 5 EC2 instances where it can run five EC2 instances where it can run these Docker containers. This goes pretty quick, but in the meantime, while all of this is happening, why don't we actually hop over and show one other aspect of what Docker affords us. So let's hop over to let's go back to our DigitalOcean. Let's look at logs. So we talked about visibility. So Docker provides a level of visibility that is very, very very clear and very transparent. So if I click over here to logs, and I can actually see a live stream. So if I go ahead and make requests on this, I should be, here I can actually see the logs come through. And this is because now Nanobox actually makes this easy to kind of consume and see, but the reality is that because Docker makes it so easy to capture all of the output from the application, that Nanobox is able to capture that output and push it up into a log stream where we can actually publish this straight to your dashboard, or we can actually push it into an archive where you can go back and look at your logs later. It makes that really easy. So what about health though? So the other thing that Docker makes really simple is the ability to, let me just go ahead and open up my health dashboard here on Nanobox. And yeah, I mean, we can see the CPU, RAM, swap, and disk, which is really easy to collect, and almost every cloud provider will show you that. But what about the breakdown per container? So this is where it gets really interesting. Because we've Dockerized this app, we're able to collect the health on a per container basis. That means that we can see that this Postgres database is using 7.2% of the RAM, the web is using 13% of the RAM, and we're able to clearly see what is using what. And the reason why that is so beneficial is it gives us so much it gives us so much flexibility and understanding if we need to now go and scale up or scale down, which we could do as a result of seeing this. We could actually say, okay, we need a bigger server, so I'm going to go ahead and choose a bigger server and save, or I want to actually move off onto a horizontal cluster. Speaking of that, let's go ahead and check up on our Nanobox. So it looks like on our AWS, the app that's running on AWS, we were successfully able to move our application from a single Docker container running on the main shared server. We're actually able to break that off, and now we have the application running 5 EC2 instances and a container, an instance of our application running on all of them. And I guess we can't really see that play out here in the actual application, but the requests are now being round robin between each of those instances. So so really quick to recap. So let me just take this moment to take a step back. As a Rails developer, what do you want? You want to focus on making an amazing Rails app. That's really where you want to be. That's where you want to focus. How do you then allow yourself to focus on writing this amazing Rails app while also ensuring that as these operational challenges arise and that you need to know what the heck is going on with my application? Why is it failing? Or maybe, hey, all of a sudden, we're seeing some steady growth. That's fantastic. That's phenomenal. How do I handle that? This is where you can actually scale up and just kind of toss those Docker containers on additional nodes. Well, how do I actually know how the application is performing? So again, all of these things that you as a team member or as a Rails developer really need to be able to be responsible for when running your Rails app in production can now be made very, very trivial if you have Dockerized your application. Now granted, I'm very biased here, and we've created a custom solution in Nanobox that is catered for application developers like Rails devs. We create a workflow that accommodates the developer and really creates all these. It makes all these really complex DevOps processes and operational challenges just trivial. But that said, I mean, you could use any of these other open source tooling. I mean, you are going to have to learn a lot, and you are going to have to go down the DevOps rabbit hole, and you're going to have to spend years kind of figuring that out and tuning and learning your lessons. And it definitely can be done. But ultimately, kind of back to why Docker? This is why Docker, because now we're seeing all of these operational advantages, all these things. Nanobox can do all of the things that it does, like the ability to stream you your logs in real time, the ability to collect historical logs. It can provide atomic updates, allow you to move your components into horizontal clusters, scale those clusters, up and down as necessary, get a real-time view of your stats. All of those things can be done because of Docker. And without Docker, this becomes very challenging. So last thing that I want to show you to kind of to wrap this up is we talked a little bit about security. And what I want to do is I want to just kind of hop in real quick into into this application. So MBX console is actually just going to dump me right into the Docker container for that particular application. And what you can see here is if we run PS, we can see these are only the processes that are running inside of the container. That's it. And you can actually eliminate these two because these are the two that I'm running just by being consoled in. We literally see just the processes that are running inside of this container are limited to the application and what's needed. I don't have access to any of the hosts. I don't have access to packages that I might have on the host. I mean, for instance, I don't have access to Docker. There's no Docker inside of this container. All of the other management tools. So when you talk about security, this app is running in production, and let's say that someone were to compromise this, heaven forbid, there is nothing for them to compromise. Like, the attack plane is so small that literally the only vulnerabilities that they could exploit would be a vulnerability within your application itself. Like, if for some reason somebody wrote a backdoor into Rails. Outside of that, the attack plane is completely cut off. So anyway, really secure. All right, so we're running up on time here. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today, and really hope that what you've been able to see here is why you would want to use Docker. Hopefully you've got a solid mental picture of kind of how Docker configuration fits into your Rails app, and I hope that you've been able to get a glimpse of what of how Docker can give you superpowers. And just want to just kind of end by saying I also recognize that that this can be very daunting, that there's a lot of things here, there's a lot of depth to a lot of this, and that I invite you to reach out to the team here at Nanobox. We'd love to have your business, and we would love to help. Configure your applications, fine-tune them, and run them in production. And so, what I want to offer you here as a thank you for joining this this webinar is a promo. If you reach out to the Nanobox sales team and let them know that you came from this promo, we will, and you end up going forward with Nanobox, we will throw in a free configuration for you. What that means is our team, who has literally seen thousands of deployments, I mean, just thousands of deployments and hundreds of Rails app deployments from all different shapes and size, will literally configure your application, a dev environment and the live production environment, and they will help. They will put that on on a cloud provider for you. So. Don't feel overwhelmed. I'm very excited about all this stuff, and I know that you can do this. But ultimately, we want you to be successful. Want you to be a successful Rails developer. And so please don't hesitate. We want your business. We would love to help you be successful. And please use this promo here. So that you can get a free configuration and tuning, so you don't have to worry about anything. So with that, I'll go ahead and let you continue on with your day. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk soon. Thank you.